Hello, team, and welcome back. This time it's resource management. Again, as you're going through these slides in your reviews, make sure you come back to this slide and that you can look at it, read it, and conversationally to yourself discuss these items. Then that's just another marker that you're in the right place. So here you are. This is the overall predictive project management approach. And notice that resource management starts in planning and has several roles in executing, right? Because executing is about managing. That's what executing is about. That makes sense. And then one process in control that we will talk about. Again, getting ready for the exam, we want to consider your study in terms of the language, the processes, and the philosophy. And there are distinctions between all these. So you've got to know the language, memorize some of these definitions, the key parts that are pointed out. The process answers are one thing. Philosophical approaches are another. So by process, you are formally collecting, for example, lessons learned in closing. But in reality, you have been collecting lessons learned philosophically from the very beginning, the moment you were assigned, right? That's the distinction. Now here we are then in resource management. It has 6 processes, 2 in planning, 3 in executing, and 1 in control. Notice that in planning, we plan resource management. That's your typical how you're going to run the rest in detail, the rest of these processes. Every management plan is the same. It details from the PMBOK guide, which is an overview. They're general good practices that you have to pick which ones you use. So it in detail now how you're going to lay out the rest of these processes. And then you're going to estimate activity resources in planning, type and quantity. And of course, this relates back, you should think to yourself, to estimating durations in schedule management and estimating costs in developing the budget. When we execute, we acquire resources, develop the team, and manage the team. What we're looking for is to create these high-performing team. And in control, notice that the control part is only about the physical resources, such as machinery and things like that. Okay? All right, so plan resource management has its inputs, tools, techniques, and outputs. Now, as an input, notice the project charter. Charter we said was always high level, but it's a unique input here. It's used very rarely after the beginning of the project planning, right? But it is used in resource management because it has the stakeholders and it has a budget amount, and all of these tie to the resources that you can afford. Then, of course, the project plan documents EEFs and OPAs. Don't forget about them. I'm not glossing over them. That's for you to study its specific context, and I've given some notes here on the slide. Now, tools and techniques. Expert judgment, it's always defined as the same, individual or group with specialized knowledge. In this case, it would be somebody with specialized knowledge in resource management, like a SHRM organization. And then we want to look at data representation. We'll discuss that in the next slide. Organizational theory, right? What's your leadership style that is going to generate and manage that high-performing team? And then, of course, meetings is a tool. And meetings requires, in project management terms, preparation, have the meeting, and then have follow-up. Now, to define roles and responsibilities, the project managers bring integration to a fine point here, right? And so Your scope baseline describes the resources that you will need. Your quality will look at the level of skill that is needed. What an engineer, what type of engineer, technologist, etc. Your stakeholder engagement process is about communicating, and in fact, I could add manage communications. It's about communicating this approach. And then of cost, of course, ties into the budget and procurement. And I could even tie risk management in here, because if you don't have the right people, the right tools at the right time, you will be in delay or pay more money. So you're integrating to the maximum extent as you work to make trade-offs in your scope, schedule, cost to make the project work. Now, planning resource management has a data representation tool, right, to define those very roles and responsibilities. And that can be done either hierarchically, which is item 1, or by an assignment matrix, or in a written format. Now, if it's hierarchical, we've seen a hierarchical in the work breakdown structure, right? Looks like an organizational chart. So you could have a work breakdown structure is a good way to assign roles and responsibilities. But there are other BSs, if I may, right? Breakdown structures. A resource breakdown structure can look just like a work breakdown structure, except this time it's focused just on the resources needed, not the deliverables, like a work breakdown structure. And an organizational breakdown structure would look like just an org chart, but defined by roles by departments. So you could have an OBS, an RBS, or a WBS to define roles and responsibilities hierarchically. The other thing you could do is do an assignment matrix. A RAM, a responsibility assignment matrix, is what is often thought of. And this is generally a grid that ties the work packages with deliverables. A more detailed version of the RAM is called a RACI. Now, a RACI chart stands for assigning to those who are responsible, accountable, consult, and inform. You must note, especially for the exam, it will be there, that only one person in each row on each activity is accountable. Several people can be responsible, several can be consulted, several can need informed, but only one can be accountable. And then the third way to define roles and responsibilities is in the written format, like a job description. Here is a picture of a RACI chart. Remember, it's a type of RAM. It's preferred, it's more detailed, it's down to the activity level. So here's an activity, create the charter. You'll see that Andy needs to be consulted. DB is accountable for developing it. But this unit right here, IGI, is responsible for creating it for DB, who will be ultimately accountable. And the list goes on. It's a RACI. There is only one A, though there can be multiple R's, multiple C's, and multiple I's. Okay, that is, we'll save that celebration of knowledge, but you're welcome to pause the video and take a look. And the answer, if you paused, is B1. Okay, so the plan resource management has 3 process outputs. It's now your resource management plan, which becomes a subsidiary plan to the overall project management plan. It also becomes a constraint now on the other knowledge areas, on cost, on schedule, on procurement, on risk, etc. And the other output that's really important is this team charter. You have developed a team charter. Your team got together and decided what were the acceptable behaviors for your team. How will you respond to each other? This is a key tool in building a high-performing team, where the team members work to develop decision-making criteria, to how they will deal with conflict resolution, what are the team values, etc. In an agile project, this event needs to allow for rapidly changing and moving targets. Now, all of this requires an understanding of management and leadership. And notice that management is largely about a sense of that control, very directive. It's more like process management. You're a commander giving orders, right? Where leadership is more about vision and goals, motivating, being persuasive, right? Leadership is the art of influence, we often hear said, to being a great communicator, and to delivering rewards. That's the leadership side of it versus the management side, and a good understanding of that is helpful. Now, management versus leadership. So it requires a developed emotional intelligence. So emotional IQ has to be positive. It's something all of us are developing all the time. So I would read this slide. If you're unfamiliar with emotional intelligence, you can Google it quickly, but it's about developing ourselves, not overreacting, guiding and leading the team. And now predictive and agile will focus on these items. These were also discussed in quality management. So here we're going to focus on lean, on Kaizen, and just in time, right? Lean, like value engineering. We said that value analysis. That was about improving the processes without modifying the scope. Kaizen is continuous improvement all the time, even in small things. And JIT, just in time, when it comes to resource management, costs money. And so just in time can be a very powerful ally in managing your budget and having the right resources. We have seen these slides already, but just as a reminder, there is a relationship between the three estimating processes in project management. Estimating costs back in cost management, estimating activity durations in schedule management, and estimating activity resources. Almost the same inputs, tools and techniques, and outputs there for your review. Now, the next process is to estimate those activity resources. Like any process, we have our inputs, tools, and techniques, and outputs. Our inputs are very common, right? So you can review those on the slide. Our tools and techniques are exactly what we used back in schedule management. Expert judgment, bottom-up estimating, analogous estimating, which was from a similar project that was recently done. It's history. It's a book on a shelf. Pull it up and see what they used for resource estimates. Parametric estimating, which I said used historical data, and it uses an algorithm or some statistical model like price per square foot. We could do data analysis, which is in terms of developing options or courses of action, alternatives. And of course the PIMS, which we've talked about. Now my outputs here are my actual resource requirements, and notice the basis of the estimates. I need to justify in a clear and complete way the resources that I'm estimating. And look at this, I'm even going to use an RBS. Remember, we said that was one of the ways to define roles and responsibilities in a hierarchical format. So these are some estimating resources, estimating isms, I call it, right? And the number, you can review this slide on your own, but the number one thing is we do not pad resources. Padding is always the wrong answer. I use the no parking symbol to emphasize that. And the rest of the slide, important, self-explanatory. Pause the tape and take a look for yourself. We're going to break now and come back with acquiring resources as a process.